And in New York City, for example, from a cyber perspective, we see about 80 billion cyber events weekly. And because of AI and automation, we're able to distill that down to less than 20 things that someone looks at. So AI in the communication space, we're branching into, but in other spaces, we have more coverage.
So that number, 80 billion suspicious cyber events each week in New York City, is remarkable. I read that that's on par with what the United States Army Cyber Command, as well as the Department of Defense, is experiencing. Is that accurate, Matt?
That is correct. The only entity that we know across the continental United States that sees as much cyber activity as we do is U.S. Army Cyber Command.
Yeah, I was really surprised to learn that. Your team really helped me dig into that, and it uncovered this whole concept of non-kinetic warfare and how China and Russia as well are attacking the United States. But it seems like a lot of that is focused actually right here in New York City. So your role takes on a certain defense mechanism to a certain extent as it relates to cybersecurity. And to take the concept a little further, what I've researched is that whereas the United States might use artificial intelligence surrounding cyber attacks, it's typically against the opposing government. But because we're in a democracy, when we have attacks from, let's say, China, it's targeting the private sector, like individuals and businesses. So, like, for example, they might steal technology, they might steal trade secrets, they might monitor decision making to anticipate what the United States will do. So, in your role, Matt, do you feel like you're taking on a much bigger responsibility, specifically as it relates to this non-kinetic warfare that I'm describing
Yeah.
beyond New York City?
Yeah. So for us, cybersecurity and defense on the cyberspace is a practice of community. And it isn't something that any one entity can do in and of itself. Now, New York City across the global landscape perhaps has a presence that's unparalleled. And when you look at the amount of cyber activity we see, it's no secret why that's here. Our mission and our job, when we look at it from a cyber perspective, is more than just protecting New York City, but it's about how we protect the greater homeland, the greater state. So we've worked in the first part of the first quarter of the administration to launch a joint security operations center. And the joint security operations center was focused on doing just that, looking at cyber beyond just the city lens and bringing together the city, the state, and other cities across the state, plus the federal government, so that we can look at cyber collectively as, as a mission that we accomplish together. So the JSOC, which is located which is located at OTI Cyber Command, right? We now have presence from both New York State, New York City, both police forces from New York State Police, New York City Police. We have partnerships on the federal level, both from the FBI and other areas. So now you have one center where you can report something that's happening. And in real time, we can work on not just looking at the incident and helping recover whatever's been compromised, but then we can also look at it from an attribution perspective. Who's the actor that may be causing this particular activity, and how do we protect not just the person that's been impacted, but other organizations that may be subject to the similar type of vulnerability. So when I look at cyber as a whole, it's not just us, it's us in the entire tech community.
Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable. It's much bigger than New York City. And I think that most New York City residents, including myself, frankly, didn't realize that your administration has such a big role in really preserving our lives in many ways. So, if China is to put malware into our critical infrastructure, what areas can they actually impact here in New York City? Like, what should we be concerned about, Matt?
So I think you shouldn't be concerned because New York City Cyber Command sits here to keep New York City safe from these types of activities. And we also have compensating controls in place should something happen that we help, respond to those things as quickly as possible. Instead of looking at something that's theoretical, we can look at something that's happened in the recent past. So if you're not familiar, circa 2020, there was a compromise, 2020, 2021, with SolarWinds, where SolarWinds is a network services tool set. And what we found, what we found was that the network toolset or the program had been compromised internally. They had a couple of internal employees that were compromised. They injected malicious code, and that malicious code was embedded in their product and distributed to anyone that consumed the product, anyone that purchased it. And by impacting just one company, the malicious actors were able to infiltrate almost every U.S. intelligence agency. Right?
Wow.
It's a good example of how bad or malicious code getting into the right place can hit almost everywhere. So for us, the things that we are all always concerned about is critical infrastructure. We're concerned about the water, right? Our water supply. We're concerned about foods, banks, financial institutions. But over 90% of the things that people consider critical, they're not operated by the government, which is why security has to be a practice of community. Think about your healthcare institutions. Think about your grocery stores. Think about all the things that the government doesn't control. If we only protect the government's assets, then we're only in a position where we can only keep part of what's critical safe. We have to make it open and inclusive to make sure that we help those that also operate critical infrastructure to help protect themselves. Which is why in the next coming months, we're working on expanding Cyber Command to include bringing in partnerships with small businesses and other businesses that operate critical infrastructure in the city.
That's really very interesting. And it also just underscores my earlier point as it relates to China using artificial intelligence and malware to attack the private sector and individuals versus the government entity, right? They're going after these infrastructural elements that in a free marketplace are run by the private sector. I read actually that the Biden administration is currently hunting. This is a recent New York Times article that the Biden administration is hunting for malicious computer code that it believes China has hidden deep inside the networks controlling power grids, communication systems, water supplies that feed military bases in the United States and around the world, intelligence and beyond. To what end? Why would China want to use malware to attack our infrastructure, Matt?
So it's hard for me to say specifically why China, but I can talk in the abstract. In the abstract, why anyone would look to attack specific infrastructure is if during any conflict you want to disrupt quality of life. And how do you disrupt quality of life? You break a couple of things, the things that make people comfortable. You break communications. So you start with disrupting the way that your emergency response operations work, and so that you can't get to the places that need you when they need you. Then you work on disrupting other things like quality of life, like water, food supply, power, right? You make people very uncomfortable. Also, making them very uncomfortable, you also limit their ability to communicate and coordinate. So when you look at why some of these particular assets may be threatened or why they may be targeted, it's all focused on disrupting your ability to respond to anything that may happen.
So, how will you recruit the private sector and in turn educate individuals about how important it is to have this New York City slash small business private sector cooperation? It seems to me like it's really critical, but yet people don't understand some of the nuances involved with technology, privacy, and these cyber threats.
So again, I'll give you a real life example of how we've done this in the physical security space and how it translates over to the cybersecurity space. In the months following 9/11, after it occurred, the New York City Police Department created a program called the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative. Now, LMSI was focused on bringing in sensory assets. So, what I by sensory, I mean like cameras, radiation detectors, chemical sensors. So, if you operated large real estate in the city and you had cameras on your facility, could you join a coalition of the willing to share that information so that you could get better response to crimes as they were occurring or conditions that may be impacting your specific facilities? Now, that program was so successful that we were able to get over 500 partners that joined that program. Since then, on the cyberspace, we have a working group that represents big tech. It represents communications and power utility and finance, and a bunch of other verticals like health, where we share information in real time about threats that are occurring across the nation. Now, we think that the part of the value proposition isn't just giving us information, is what do we do with it? So being able to provide tool sets that help these businesses protect themselves, I think that's the key thing that will attract people to come and join the program. Shared responsibility, shared mission will be part of it, but they also need value out of being part of it. So it's got to be more than just information. In the event that you have a compromise or something along that lines, knowing that you're not standing by yourself and you have someone that will assist and help you recover anything that may have been lost. I think that that's going to be part of the value proposition, just like we saw on the physical security side. If you provide access to cameras, then that means we can give you better response when it comes to things that may be occurring in your facilities.